Kyle Mohan Racing, and we are hanging out in front of my Formula Drift RX-8 and one of my Formula Drift 20B KMR blocks. And figured this is a great opportunity to talk a little bit about these particular motors. I start off with a Cosmo 20B directly out of Japan. These were never really available in the USA. They came in the Cosmo sedan, and the Cosmo had both a 13B and 20B option. We never got it in the United States, so we're starting off with a block that was never available in the United States, but we can import them these days. And the primary components you're looking for are your center thick plate, which is a bearing carrier plate, the eccentric shaft, and that center bearing. Although this stuff can be sourced aftermarket, and with the billet engines that I'm working with and are available now, you could essentially take a 13B, buy an aftermarket shaft, an aftermarket center plate, and build a 20B. And in this case, a lot of the components in my 20B builds are often 13B components that have been modified. Whether they're Cosmo or FD, it doesn't really matter. Those components can be modified to fit 20B blocks. I will always stud my 20Bs. I do full studding, half-inch studs, similar to what you're doing on a piston block with removing the OEM bolts and replacing those bolts with studs in the heads, and sometimes doing machine work for oversized studs. That's similar to what we do in the Rotary world. The length of the block, we run oversized studs. The whole block gets machined in line, each plate individually machined and reamed. So we ensure precise fitment, and you can see actually some of those studs go straight through the block. So the whole block is reinforced, and this is limiting twisting of the block, expansion of the block, both in the rotor housing and lengthwise, because these are a modular engine. And with that, we need to add strength when we're using them in extreme performance situations. I run 30 pounds of boost with a 200 shot of nitrous, and what we have found is with proper studding, side cutting the rotors to allow for more rotor movement, high speed balancing done by Mazda tricks, and often lightening of the rotors as well, we're able to turn these engines to 10,000 RPM and run high levels of boost and still have reliability. In the current Formula Drift car, we've been using this block for about 3 seasons, although we did have a service about 1.5 years ago, and we recently did a service due to a corner seal that was damaged in a nitrous backfire. Essentially, the block itself and the majority of its components are going on 3 seasons. It is Series 4 high compression rotors. The bearing combination is the rotors are running Mazda factory race deep groove bearings. Rear center plate and front main bearings are all 3-window. So we're using racing beat 3-window bearings in the front and rear, and the factory 3-window bearing in the center main. Everything's polished, WPC treated. Because these motors are often used side plates, we have lapped all the side plates. Rotor housings were new or very close to new when this block was originally assembled, although like I said, now it is going on a substantial run time with some services in there. I think really when you get down to it, proper tuning, Haltech ECU, proper injection, radium, 2600cc injectors that came from Evolved Injection, the studding, E&J Apex seals. I'm running the KMR series unbreakables. If you're just running any unbreakable seal, I think that's a wise choice with these types of high-level boost motors. And the E&Js or KMR E&Js are really my preference at this point. 2 millimeter. I don't run 3 millimeter. And often I talk about the fact that I run OEM corner seals and all the other OEM components. This was the first time in going on 20 years of running rotary motors that I've actually broken a corner seal. And we know what it was. It was an accidental backfire with nitrous. So I don't blame the corner seal, but I could see where in some cases, just like we're running the non-breakable apex seals at this point, you could go into solid or different versions of corner seals. In our application, we have enough runtime. I don't like running harder corner seals due to the wear. They sometimes dig into the side plates, but I think I could, see going either way depending on what the customer or what I was doing with the motor. We're running the factory dry sump system. We do have it shimmed to 120 psi. I like to run a high oil pressure because we do run high RPM, high boost levels. These motors get pretty extreme. I keep all of my oil temperature, water temperatures under 230 degrees, which means I really don't ever try to get to anything above 220. We're still running in through the back of the block, so we're running the traditional oiling direction and system. Rear main bearing in first, coming across to the center, and then down into the front main bearing. I'll often run a pressure gauge both at the back and the front of the motor just so we can monitor any variation in oil pressure, although we've never really seen that, at least any time recent. I do polish and bore out some of the oil passages to maximize oil flow. And we are running a 1/2 inch thick dry sump plate, which I believe also helps minimize any type of block, flex, twist, expansion that often then induces cracking of either front, center, or rear irons, which the traditional crack points are in these oil galleries. And again, the billet blocks solve a lot of these problems, but if you're working with a traditional block, which obviously is very reliable and still very usable, the studding helps reduce any chance, really, in my opinion, of that type of cracking or breaking, even in very extreme situations. This is actually a Formula Mazda reluctor setup, although there are some other aftermarket versions available. This was one we picked up years ago, and it's worked very successfully with our setup. The motor is actually a street port. Although we have ran bridges, half bridges, semi-peripherals, we came back to a large street port that's very similar to what my street port side of my half bridge porting template is. And this porting design was developed while I was working with Mazda Tricks, heading up a lot of their racing rotary programs in production racing, time attack, and a lot of that led to our drift program. So basically what we found out was in Formula Drift, where we're competing against a lot of V8s, 2Js, inline motors, boosted, nitrous fed, we need torque and we need mid RPM range power. So by using a large street port with a medium-sized turbo and a 200 shot of nitrous, we can create high horsepower numbers at what I would consider middle range RPM. So we're getting peak horsepower, 8,500 to 9,000 RPM, but we're still able to spin the motor to 10,000 RPM, giving us what I consider a long and very drivable power band. In some cases, I think a lot of people go to semi-peripheral ports or bridge port setups. They sound great. They're awesome. I've definitely am an advocate of them. But I think a lot of the times they go to those for horsepower, and it is a little more difficult to make large horsepower numbers with street ports, but I think the reward is a more usable power band. This car idles at 1,200, 1,500. I mean, I turn it up a little bit just to keep things going, but it's not like a motor that wants to idle at 2,000 RPM and the power band comes in at 6,000 RPM. This is already bringing in power down at 4,000 RPM. So very strong, capable motors, very reliable. Like I said, a lot of these components are going on 3 seasons now. This was basically our second service in its lifespan of this car and this particular motor build. And really, it came down to just I wanted to do an inspection. I had a hunch that something may have happened in that nitrous backfire. and it did crack a corner seal. So luckily everything looked gorgeous otherwise. It's going back in. Big shout out to Renewable Lubricants, running their 2050 biosynthetic oil, and the bearings are looking gorgeous. I'll do a video. I got some of those. I saved them. So we'll talk about that. And we've been running their premix. The rotor housings looking gorgeous even at this high level of RPM. And we're using ethanol, so all things would state that, essentially that's a harsh combination. And we're seeing great results all around. So a little KMR tech talk about our engine setup. I know it's one of the questions that came through, and I wasn't intending to do this. I didn't think I was going to have the motor out, but we ended up with it out. So there you go. Oh, Exity. Thank you, Exity. Triple disc Hyper Series lightweight flywheel racing clutch. That combo's been in there for a couple rounds now. And when I had it apart, it barely even looked like it was broken in. So, again, Exity in OEM cars as a manufacturer option. Great aftermarket performance products. Get them from Mazda Tricks. Get them online. Make sure they're authentic. I've never had an Exity product have an issue in my race car or in my street car, and I run them in both. And, I'd say a lot of the components, because I'm a rotary guy and my street car is also a rotary car, a lot of the components I run on the race cars, I run in my street cars. They're components I believe in. They're components we sell at Mazda Tricks. I don't even work directly at Mazda Tricks anymore. I have my own shop, but, I believe in all of those products and everything we do at Mazda Tricks and KMR. So enjoy these tech talks. If you have questions, let us know. That's how we bring these tech talks about. It's not a TikTok, it's a tech talk. Comment down below, and we're going to brap on out of here. I talked too long. It was a long video. Brap, 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 brap.